Well, good evening. Welcome to the regular planning commission meeting, Grand Blanc Township. What day is today? September 5th, 2024. Please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We almost have a full house today. We have 8 planning commission members here. Ms. Hugo, Mr. Andre, Mr. Johnson, Mr. Anderson, Mr. Gellings, Mr. Yancho, Mr. Hoffman, Mr. Bush, our planning and zoning administrator, Mr. Smith, with our planning consultant, Mr. Andy Amat. Close enough?
Everybody killed.
All right. That takes care of the roll call. Opportunity for public comment. I guess I need to open up the public comment. I don't see anyone present, but maybe out of sight. Open up the public hearing. Anyone like to address the planning commission? Doesn't look like it. We'll close the public comments section. Move on to the approval of the minutes from August 8th. Mr. Secretary.
Mr. Chairman, I've reviewed the minutes as presented, and I believe them to be substantially correct, and I move for their adoption. Acceptance.
I'll move to accept the minutes as presented.
I think Mr. Yancho made a
I'll
motion
second
to
the motion.
approve.
Sorry. You didn't correct me. I'll support.
You support the motion. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion passes 8-0. Approve this evening's agenda. Any changes?
None.
Motion to approve by
Moved.
Mr. Bush, support by Ms. Hugo. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion passes 8-0. Correspondence?
None.
Old business?
None.
New business?
You got me to start? Okay. So we're here today to do a little bit of discussion for decks and similar accessory structures. We've had a recent incident where we had to deal with pergolas. Well, on top of pergolas, we thought we'd want to talk about covered decks, covered patios, and sticking pergolas somewhere in there in between. So in front of you, you just got today, in your packet, you had kind of language that Andy had provided from other municipalities that Giffords works with. So that was kind of the beginning of this. And then in front of you today, you have a memorandum from Giffords, kind of laying out what potential things we could change and or add to the ordinance in order to make my life simpler on a day-to-day basis with covered decks, covered patios, and pergolas. We know they're going to be coming more often. I've got a company that is going to be building in Grand Blanc Township quite a bit more, maybe not so much this year, but they're very custom built and they're expensive things. So we want to make sure before we get too far down the road that we get these defined and put in the book somewhere, somehow. So, Andy, if you want to.
Yeah, I'll just add. Planning Commission, I'll go ahead and add too, if we want to just talk through these examples, maybe that would be kind of helpful to just kind of get everybody to see, what kind of structures are permitted and how they are currently permitted. Where's kind of the gray area / challenges that, staff and code enforcement and building and everybody's having with analyzing the ordinance. and then just see about what kind of maybe changes we want to make. So we provide some pictures here for your analysis. That first example, I don't think anybody's really contesting that. That kind of deck would be permitted. It's pretty clear that assuming it's no higher than 3 feet off the ground, there's really no issue with that, kind of starting there. You then look at the pergola in example 2.
To add to that, though, those are allowed to encroach into the rear setback by 15 feet.
And side setback
And
too.
side setback by 3 feet.
Well, it's kind of weird. You're allowed to get 20 feet from the rear lot line, right? Or 3 feet from the side lot line. So you're able to get pretty close to the side lot line.
Right.
Moving into the pergola, there's a little, roof-like, not really quite roof, but some sort of a decorative, structure on top that is allowed to be added to an unenclosed deck, as long as it's not attached to the house, right? Because when it becomes attached to the house, it needs to follow the house's setbacks.
Currently, yes.
Then when you look at example 3, you have a roof that's clearly attached to the house, so that needs to follow the house setbacks. That can't do any of the encroachability, for lack of a better term, into the setbacks. So that one's definitely got to stay off the lot lines when it adds that roof to it. And then the fourth example is a combination of both.
Question for you.
Yep.
I don't know what this would look like, but let's say that the roof that's added fits within the setback lines.
Yep.
The deck is bigger than that. How does that?
I think that would comply, right, Jeremy?
I'd have to look at where both ended up
Yep.
lying on the property. So if the deck,
Deck
like,
would still go within 3 feet of the
kind of like in example number 3, where you have the roof structure that's clearly marked, that's where it ends, as long as that doesn't encroach. But if they continue the deck farther out and it's not covered, then I would have to look at each portion of it individually.
Okay.
And I agree. I think, that could comply. Yep. And then we asked a couple of questions at the end. I think one of the issues, just analyzing the issue, is that, maybe attached could also include, set up against as kind of the same thing as attached, where you're not structurally attaching it to the house, but it's close enough to the house that it, for all intents and purposes, it's attached
Visually.
visually. Yep. And then also the covered is a better term to use for enclosed, covered with a roof. I mean, and that could get into, I guess that you might create some nonconformities there if you've been allowing.
So my worry is that we've kind of discussed in-house that if you have like a Florida room that has permanent walls, permanent windows, permanent doors, that has to be treated as the setbacks for the house. So that we've kind of eliminated out of the scenario and the problems. The problem comes into is these custom-built pergolas are not attached. The one in question sits about 6 inches from the house, but is permanently attached to brick patio pavers and can meet the wind load and things like that. We've got all the engineering on it, so that's not the problem. But once it's not attached, how do we treat these? Because where do we draw the line of, because let's just say somebody has a gazebo that's out in the middle of their yard. That one, again, to me, is easy because now it's a detached structure. We treat it like a shed, 3 foot off the lot, all lot lines, and 10 foot from the house. But where do these pergolas fall? Because these custom-built ones have where they can open and close the slats. It's not like, similar to example 2, but
Covered.
it has the ability to be covered. It's not weather-resistant like a Florida room would be. It's more sun blocking than anything, but still, we have to draw a line somewhere and give me and my team a clear definition of how we're gonna permit these things. So that's kind of where the pickle is of tonight, is where do we stand? My suggestion for the covered patios and covered decks is easy. I'm still wrestling with the pergola idea, but for like example number 3, if it's a covered deck, covered patio, just like the open deck, if we call it a covered deck, not an enclosed deck, because enclosing means to me is you're enclosing with walls. Covered deck, covered patio could, if you guys all agree, that could encroach like the open deck could. As long as the understanding is that would never be encapsulated. If they were to encapsulate it, they may not be able to because they would have to pull another remodel permit to make it a Florida room if that was the case.
So are you suggesting it would have to meet the building setback lines?
No, my suggestion is a covered deck can meet the standards of a open deck.
Okay, but the difference between 2 and 3,
That's where I'm wrestling. I'm wrestling with 2. 3, I am okay with, if everybody else is okay. That one seems fairly simple to define. We can say covered deck, covered patio, that's attached.
yeah.
We can clearly define those because as you can see, it's attached to the house because it has the roof structure. It's peaked. It's a normal roof that would kind of match. It has support system like a house would. Has shingles, things like that. Example 2 with the pergola, that's where we're struggling with how to define these things. Do we make them attach them in some way somehow, or do we care if they're attached or not? But then it gets into, if it's not attached, just like a shed has to be, if it's considered an accessory structure, has to be 10 foot from the house. Well, clearly that defeats the purpose of the pergola being right outside your back patio.
So the one that you were talking about is 6 inches from the building. What if they have to meet the building setback line so that these two really follow the same
In
roof
this,
structure?
in this instance, it does, thankfully. So that is why we didn't have any heartburn over the example that I have currently on my desk. It's not a big deal. It does meet that. But going forward, the next one may not.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure there's plenty of decks that already do the encroaching, and they're probably gonna wanna cover that as much as they can
Right.
in matching the encroaching
Bush?
deck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Question, I guess, what are you gonna do for, say, awnings? So you got these companies that sell awnings that attach right to your house and.
Retractable.
Right, yeah, they're retractable, they have wind sensors on them. What are you gonna call those?
Are you saying retractable, or are you saying ones that are permanently affixed?
Retractable,
Okay.
both, for that matter.
Well, there's probably the skeleton is permanently affixed and it
Not
retracts.
always.
It's attached to the house usually,
Not all-
and then you
yeah.
press a button and man, it goes,
Yeah,
covers your
almost.
deck,
I've
and then
seen
the
it 'cause
wind,
it's
it
got
comes
it's
back.
got an arm. It's almost like a RV. It's got an arm that comes up underneath of it for support. Yeah, I know what you're
And
talking
does it enclose completely or just
No,
cover?
nope, it's just a shade.
Then,
over your
then
deck.
maybe we follow the Jeremy idea of kind of defining a covered but unenclosed, which is kind of what that example 3 is. It's covered yet unenclosed, and maybe that can get into the encroaching.
So to go one farther, if you look at example 3, it's obviously there's structure on the outside, the inside of the house, attached to the house, the structure is actually in the wall. So you can see that's part of the house. The sunsetter then is attached to the house permanently, just like example 3.
Right.
So by definition, you're saying,
I don't have any heartburn calling it a covered patio or covered deck.
No, that was,
Johnson, you do?
I was actually, my question was about retractable awnings. But as far as having structures in the yard that are covered, I guess my question would be is, if I pulled a shed permit for that, couldn't we just call it
Well, that's,
Closed covered storage area?
that's the pickle we're kind of running into, because that's what it was. We don't have anything currently in our system that defines that thing. So we're trying to, with you guys' help, trying to
Yeah, yeah.
define that, come up with a plan, figure out how to permit these things, because, and then my next question was, is where do you draw the line in the sand of, it's a accessory structure, gazebo kind of thing out in the middle of the yard, or one of these, like an example two, where it's 6 inches off the house? Where do we define setbacks, or do we define setbacks if it's that, as long as it meets the same setback? Well, it can't meet the same setbacks as a shed, because a shed has to be 10 foot from the house.
Yeah, that's the other wrench
So
in it.
there's the other curveball in all this, is that,
From the house or the deck?
so for a shed, you have to be 10 foot from the house, 10 foot from any other accessory structure, and 3 foot from the side and rear lot line.
Gotcha.
Is there any concern, does any of this concern come from like a fire issue? I mean, this pergola being that close to the house is.
That was a issue for our building inspectors. They had that concern. But if you look at example 3, most of that is wood, and if let's just say somebody puts one of those solo stoves and has a campfire under it, and it goes up, it's gonna take the whole house down anyway, so building material, I think, is irrelevant at that point, but it's more, how do we define these with setbacks from the house, or do we not care? I guess that's where we're kind of stuck.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Anderson?
I haven't got the number at the front of my head, but I think any covered structure such as a covered deck in example 2, I would want to keep that at 20 feet as well. So maybe any enclosed or covered deck within 4, 6 feet from the home needs to be considered part of the structure. Can we do something 20 feet off the lot line? That almost looks like a room to me, and I could see people down the road going to Home Depot and screening that in, kind of thing. I don't know. If it's that close to the house, I'd consider it part of the structure.
You're saying 2 and 3 is part of the structure?
Yes, correct.
So you want it treated like the house?
Yes, with the
Setback.
20-foot setback.
Or,
It would be 35, actually, if it's part of the
well, it
house.
depends on the zoning, that's why it says it can encroach 15
Yeah.
feet into the rear setback. So each zoning has its own rear setback.
And a residential zoning type.
Exactly, each residential zoning has a little bit different rear setback requirement, so that's why it says it can encroach 15 feet into that rear setback.
Mr. Yancho?
Please correct me if I'm wrong, but if a person builds a deck and does not attach it to the house but keeps it separated on pylons or something, it's not considered part of the tax accessible
That's
part of the house?
inaccurate.
That's inaccurate? It is regardless of if it's attached or not.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
As a licensed assessor, yes. Yes, it's still.
That's why I directed it to you.
Yes, as a current and former assessor in my previous life, yes, that is still taxable, yes, regardless of attachment or not. Anything on the property is taxable.
Mr. Johnson?
Yeah, so Jeremy, can you walk me through again, because right now, if I'm understanding this correctly, the setbacks are driven based on attached or unattached, correct?
What, no, for the deck?
for deck.
Are you talking a deck?
For a deck, yeah.
So a deck, it's not attached or attached, it's a covered or uncovered,
Enclosed or
or
unenclosed?
closed
Yep.
and enclosed too, yes.
Whether it's attached or not attached, right?
We're not looking at it.
Doesn't matter.
Decks doesn't matter. if
Decks
they're
doesn't
attached
match
or-
if they're attached or
But
unattached.
then cover, like the enclosures and the Florida rooms and those type of things, that's.
Right,
when
so
the
attached obviously is associated with the footprint of the home.
So as it stands today, anything but an unenclosed deck, so a regular open air deck, anything besides that has to be treated as the same as the house setbacks.
Right, so I guess my question is, I mean, figure 2 doesn't really, to me, that's not enclosed.
Right.
So I guess my
Neither is
question.
3,
What's that?
neither is 3.
True, but 3 is attached to the home.
Sure.
2 is not. So, I guess, so where are you seeing the confusion or the problem that comes between the attached and not attached?
It's
As far as setbacks are
the
concerned,
pergolas, because they can be out in the middle of the yard.
right?
And they could be 6 inches to a foot from the house. They also could be attached to the house. So they've got 3 different scenarios that could throw a wrench into all of this.
Right, but I guess what I'm saying is that if we define it based on attached or unattached, wouldn't that make
That's-
it pretty
That
clear?
is an option. That is an option.
This is only 6 inch difference, and you'd fall under completely different rules.
Yeah, you could require the pergola to be attached to the house, and then we're kind of in the clear, I think.
But
But
then,
they're not always doing that.
but then if let's just say the scenario that I came up with is that, what if I have a pergola, it's, I get one of the ones that are, it kind of looks like example 2, but it's out in the middle of my yard. Well, it's not even out in the middle of my yard. I want it 8 feet from the house. Is that okay?
What if
That's,
you've got the detached structure or accessory structures have to be 10 feet. If you move it within the 10 feet, then you need to meet the building setbacks. Or does that work or not? Maybe not.
potentially, but
I don't have a problem with the pergola. I don't have a problem with this covered. So that's what I'm trying to figure out how to make that work. Mr.
Yeah.
Hoffman, did you have a comment?
So a couple things. One, I think the pergola that we're looking at is not your ultimate concern, I don't think, because you're also looking at the ones that can close.
that too, but also example 2 is in the same realm.
I know, but if, we may have to separate that. I mean, this is different than something that can be closed.
Sure, but it's not,
And the reason why I'm saying that,
Go ahead.
real quick, is why do we have setbacks in the first place?
to protect the neighbors.
Exactly. So if we all of a sudden allow a covered like this to be in the setback, we're defeating the purpose of the setback for the building that has a top on it and things of that nature. I guess I don't like the idea of things that are covered moving into the setback because it's a way to encroach on the neighbors, and that's what the setbacks are there to protect against in the first place.
Yes, I agree with you, but my argument with that would be is that if somebody wanted to have a fire pit on the property line, there's no rules against that, and now you're encroaching on the neighbor, not with a structure, but you can have a shed 3 foot off the property line. It could be, you could have a pole barn 3 foot off the property line. That's
But it would have to be 10 feet away from the building,
from the house.
from the house.
Right, but 3 foot on the property line.
Well,
So
houses
they-
are
so the-
usually where people, get crammed up a little bit more on lines too. I mean, if my shed is 3 feet off the line, but it's 20 feet away from my house.
Sure.
There's
It's
open
away
air
from
around it.
you, but it's,
And it's also away from their house, probably, because the houses are pretty much in the same.
well, but then so would be pergola.
Well, not if we allow it to be on the deck. It's right next to the house, which is just making your house envelope a little bit bigger and wider, and we're trying to keep that space
see where
between
you're going with it. Yep.
houses. I would like to keep that space there for the neighbors. Not for them to wake up and say, I think I have 6 feet here, and all of a sudden the next day, nope, they're right on the line all of a sudden, or right coming over.
I mean, we could always say that they can't be in the side yard setback. I don't have any problem with that. We could
Yeah, I mean, I
eliminate
think
the
I
side
think
yard
that's
setback and
that's the
all that.
feedback we're exactly looking for, though, too, is on how we create actual language to
So they'd only
set this
be
up.
in the rear yard.
In the rear yard.
They have to be in the rear yard now, but
Then they're just have
accessory
to still
structures.
still meet the house's side setback, but they have the flexibility to encroach into the rear yard a bit. Is that a little bit more palatable?
Yeah, I see that, yeah.
so we don't want it, so you want to treat it like the house, not an accessory, like a shed. So that way that is farther away than even a shed would be, yes?
Yeah, I'm just worried about the side setbacks.
Okay, all right.
John?
Just to add
Right.
one quick little thing to Mr. Hoffman, generally sheds aren't gathering places for people.
Sure. Yeah,
So-
no, I agree. So just as an example, in R4, it's 10 foot on one side and 6 foot on another. R3 is the same. R2 is 12 on each side, and R1 is 15 on each side. Predominantly, I'd say half, if not three-quarters of the township is R2, so you're getting 12 on each side. So 24 in between houses. So if we kept the pergolas out of the side setback, you're okay with that? Are you just saying example 2, or are you saying the covered one as well?
Yeah, but I just, any kind of roof or things, I mean, this pergola, if it's not something that they can enclose, they could put a tarp up there if they want to. I just see that a cover, if we go into the setbacks, the side setbacks, I think neighbors could be like, hey, I thought had some protection here, now I don't.
What about open decks, though? Because as currently, open decks,
A roof seems more encroaching to me than a deck. I get it that you could be on the same thing, I just, this thing up here, and I just, if I was a neighbor and I'm looking out my window, I see a roof. If I look out my window and there's a deck, I don't see that, I don't think as much. I don't think it would bother me as much.
Mr. Anderson?
I'm going to agree completely with that, and while you were saying that, my thought was, how about any covered deck or structure like this, if it's out in the backyard, like a gazebo or something, so that's one thing, but if it's directly accessible from the house, meaning I open my sliding door and boom, I'm on my deck, then that setback should be 20 feet. Versus,
whatever the rear setback.
whatever, yeah, depending on for the
Yep.
R1 type house. But yeah, if it's directly accessible from the home itself, make it fit that requirement.
My only question, where do we draw our line in the sand then, is my question. If it, do we say, is it 6 feet from the house? Is it 3 feet from the house? Is it 10 feet from the house? Where do you draw that line in the sand? I'm just asking for clarification. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. So I just would like to hear some discussion on that, of where, if we do go that route, where would you consider that to where it could be, well, in Mr. Hoffman's example, would you consider a gazebo, an octagon gazebo with a cover on it? You don't want that in the side yard either, right?
Not, yeah. not on
Nothing
the
with a
side of
roof
the house.
structure, nothing with a roof structure you don't want in the side yard?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's not that I don't want it there, I think that the neighbors feel like they have protection as it is right now.
And that, well, I want to get, but I want to make sure if once we get to, when we define detached, where,
Detached,
like a gazebo,
okay.
where, what would you want the side yard setback to be in the rear, well, I guess side and rear yard? You'd want it more than 3 foot of a shed. Would you want, I guess we'd have to look and see.
The funny thing is, the further you're away from the house,
The closer it can get to the side yard. I think that's what you're saying.
well, actually, what I'm saying is, why would you want to shove it off to a side? I mean, you would want privacy yourself, in your gazebo or whatever it is that,
Well, I've seen a lot of hot tubs and gazebos. I've seen a lot of,
they're real close to the house.
I've seen them out in the middle of the yards.
Cold winter.
Well, but
Well,
you just said the key word. They're in the middle of the yards. They don't put things 30 feet away from the house shoved over on the property line.
Right, but that's what I'm asking, is where, I need clear rules in my book, when somebody comes in and wants to pull a permit for a gazebo or a pergola out in the middle of their yard, how close can they get to the side and rear lot line without encroaching on the neighbor?
Mr. Yancho?
What height of deck are we talking about? Are we talking about a 3-foot high deck or a 10-foot high deck or a 12-foot high deck to build a gazebo on top of it?
We don't have any height requirements at this
Right
point.
now, the unenclosed deck can't be higher than 3 feet to get that flexibility though, right? To get the encroachment flexibility, it's still gotta be 3 feet or lower. So you can't encroach right now anyways if it's super high off the ground, correct?
Second floor
Yes.
deck.
Yep.
And what does the elevation of the property bear in this situation? If
3 foot from grade,
3
so
foot from grade.
So wherever they
if
put
you're
it-
Talking about
Right.
a home that's built 15 feet higher than the adjacent home.
Not adjacent home, on that site, at
on
that
it.
point.
So, but from the neighbor's perspective, it's
Yeah.
elevated quite high.
I understand that, but, and I agree with you, but we have to take it for the grade level at the property that it sits on.
I understand.
So we just have to,
But
when we
on this-
permit things, it's permitted for where it is on that site, so.
Just trying to establish what effect it may have on the
Mm-hmm. Yep, I understand.
neighbors.
Yep,
So did I hear you say a pole barn can be built 3 foot from the property?
yes, sir.
In what zoning?
All.
Maybe that should be looked at. I agree. Crazy.
That's been that way for
Yeah,
decades.
yeah,
Wow.
I believe it. I think it's been overlooked.
Yep, that's on that second page, detached accessory buildings.
Now, we have size requirements because we don't want them taking up the whole backyard. There's a percentage of the backyard they can take up. There's a square footage requirement or calculations based on the,
So, but if you're on an R1, you got a 2 acre lot or whatever it
it's
is.
really more predicated on your backyard, square footage and your house square footage. Determine
So it
size.
hasn't been an issue.
Not that I've heard. Mm-mm. Setbacks, no. Sizes, yes.
One thing that comes to mind, I don't know, and then the covered pergola, I think that almost should be considered part of the structure. Not in Grand Blanc Township, in another community. It's the city of Grand Blanc. I know a homeowner who bought a house, and before the first moving van showed up, he had a contractor covering his pergola with a sloped, it's not shingle, but it's a
Metal-
corrugated
corrugate,
plexiglass
yeah.
grade metal roof. You know, it's like, how easy is that to do here? That didn't take him very long to do it. And that, kind of at that point, he's pretty much got it screened in. When the city approved it, it was a 3 foot off the ground deck. So how do we,
I mean, if we see it, we can enforce it, but we can't
Yeah.
enforce everything. I mean, that's just,
yeah,
I mean,
it
we,
wasn't in Grand Blanc Township. so-
right, I mean, we can what if this to death, and I understand that, but if somebody's coming in and they're being honest and they're giving me a permit, I need rules and regulations, that way I can make sure that everybody that comes in and pulls a building permit is doing it uniformly.
Mr. Hoffman.
Well, do you want to go? I think what I'm comfortable with is a cover needs to stay, whether it's attached or within 10 feet of the house, needs to stay with the building setbacks, is what I would do. That's what I'm comfortable with, to make it very simple.
So you're saying example 3? You're saying either one?
Well, it's 3 would, yeah, it's a covered roof, so it needs to stay within the building setbacks. I mean, and I would think that it could actually go all the way to the rail, to the neighbor, because it's,
That wouldn't be in the side yard,
that
right?
wouldn't be in the side rail. So they could actually make this wider if they wanted to in that case. But if the deck was in the side setback,
Wouldn't be able to cover
I
that.
don't think it should be covered.
Right, and I agree with you on that.
And then I think if it's within 10 feet of the house, just make it, I mean, you know, because if you say 6 inches, don't make it 7 inches away from the house. I mean, for all intents and purposes, number 2, whether it's attached or not, it's attached in my mind, into what people are going to visually be seeing this. And just because it's not covered now, somebody's going to come in later and put something up there, or on the sides, you know, they'll put some stuff up there, you know, that.
Windscreen.
Windscreen it's, I can take it down. Oh, you don't like that? I'll take it down. I'll put it right back up when I have a party and things of that nature, or roll up and things of that nature. For simple, anything within 10 feet that have something on top of it needs to be with the building setbacks. That's just me.
Mr. Johnson first.
Mr. Smith, which one of these ordinances that have been given as examples would best fit what you're trying to accomplish?
I have my own personal opinions, but that's,
Right, but I'd just like to kind of understand which way or what direction, or so we could kind of start to pinpoint and hone in on what, because there's a lot of different ideas going around here.
Right.
And it'd be nice if we could actually get something to you that would help you.
So I mean, everything that, I mean, Andy's taking notes for us, so we can kind of, after the meeting, him and I can sit down and go over things. I don't have, if it's attached like example 3, I don't have any heartburn with it being encroach 5 or 15 feet within the 15-foot setback, like the unenclosed deck. I don't have any heartburn.
Rear.
The rear setback, yes. The side, I agree 100% with you. Nothing should be in the side, nothing should be covered in the side yard. I agree with that 100%. But example 3, if it wanted to, if there was an existing deck and somebody wanted to build what's in example 3 additionally after the fact, and it was already, you know, if it was, the deck was already 15 foot encroaching into the rear setback, adding a roof to it, I hear all the examples, but just my personal opinion, I don't see it as an issue.
Right.
I guess my question is, which one of these examples, like, because I'm looking at Shelby Township, Farmington Hills, Bloomfield
Okay.
Township,
I see
Washington.
what you're saying.
Which one of those best solves the problem that you're having at this time?
They all have their pluses and minuses. That's, we kind of gave that to you so you could kind of, so we could kind of play with it and we could plug and play what we liked and what we didn't like.
Right.
So, excuse me, that was kind of examples of what we can and can't do,
Okay.
or things that the other people have done. Like I said, it makes it simple if they can, if the cover, like in example 3, in my mind, can be treated like an open deck, that's fine. If that's not what you guys want to see,
Are you talking 2 or 3?
3. My heartburn is on 2, but I like Hoffman's idea of if it's within the 10 feet, it has to be considered like example 3, or it's got to be treated like it's got to be.
Separate structure.
Right, we got to, that's where I'm having the issue is 3 doesn't give me heartburn either way. But it'd be nice if it was, there's continuity. If the deck is allowed to encroach 15 feet, let the covered deck or covered patio, because we don't permit for a brick patio, concrete patio, but we would have to permit for a covered patio. So if you pour a concrete slab or you lay brick pavers, we don't make you pull a permit for that. As soon as you put a roof over it, you would have to pull a permit for it.
So just to clarify, I guess with Mr. Hoffman, the 10-foot that you're talking about, does that change building setback lines? Or you're saying follow the building setback line?
Yeah, the only distinction I'm making is if this cover is within 10 feet, basically consider it that it's attached to the house.
Part of the building.
Right. And if it's more than 10 feet, it's not attached to the house, part of the building. And so if it's attached to the building or appears to be attached to the building, those are, it adheres to the setbacks for a building. If it's past, it adheres to the accessory buildings that are outside.
I like it. Perfect sense. You had something?
No, I was, my questions were answered.
I got,
Mr. Andre?
I think there's been a lot of discussion, you probably got a lot of feedback, and that's what you were soliciting.
yes.
You deal with it on the daily basis. You've given, I think, really good examples of what it could be. Maybe then we're throwing it back to you guys and say, take the information that you have the feedback, craft something, bring it back.
Yes.
I think, I like the idea of having examples. Give us an example of what it is. I think really good, direction
Give you
in
a
which to
couple
go.
little-
And I think.
Oh, this was very
We trust you
helpful.
guys in order to craft that language.
Maybe we could do a couple little plot plans. That's helpful.
Yeah, I think so.
Just do a couple little scenarios.
Comments?
Well, I just wonder if a motion to table is in order, or?
Well, it's discussion, so what we'll do is we'll have another memo next month in October, and then we'll have more discussion, and then at that point, if we feel comfortable, we can push it to November for a public hearing, if you see fit. Or we can talk about it again in November, so I think we've got a lot of feedback. I have one other question for Mr. Hoffman, though. Are you saying for the pergolas, or for both, 2 and 3, you want them to be considered as the house setback, or just the pergolas?
Both.
Both,
Okay.
if the roof or pergola is within 10 feet or touching the building.
Okay, so
Connected.
attached or within 10 feet, you want it treated like the house setback.
The house side setback, but you're okay with
No, rear-
flexibility to the rear, right?
I'm okay with the rear.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, that was,
So they can make it longer, they just can't make it wider.
okay, that was my clarification is, okay, so we're all, I think we're all in agreement that
Yes.
we don't want to see any of these any structures in the side yard,
Right.
Right.
right? I think we're all in agreement with that. And then,
I got that.
okay, all right, perfect.
Get what you needed?
I think we're.
think so.
I think we got a good direction
Yep.
now.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Is that motion to adjourn?
No, I've got a couple. There's, no committee, well, I don't know, do you have a committee report?
I have
Okay.
nothing to report.
Other business, I have some conflicts, for the next two meetings. October was supposed to be October 3rd. I'd like to push it to the next week to the 10th. And the November meeting, instead of the 7th, I'd like to push it to the next week to the 14th, if we could. If anybody has any
Day before you're on.
heartburn. It's the day before.
December, or October 10th.
So I'd like,
November 14th.
I'd like to move October to the 10th and November to the 14th if possible.
I don't see an issue with that on my calendar, but
I'm good.
we need a motion to do so.
Yeah.
Yes, I would like a motion, please.
I'll make a motion that we move the October Planning Commission meeting to the 10th of October, and for November, go to the 14th of November.
Motion by Mr. Anderson, is there support? Support. Mr. Yancho. All right. I guess we can go voice, and if we see any issues, yeah. So, all those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? There you go.
All right, thank you. We can mention it real quick.
We will be adjourned if you don't take much
We
longer.
got potentially one other thing.
Wasn't added to the agenda at the beginning of the meeting, sorry.
It's under other business.
Yeah, I'm okay.
So we got one little other thing that you're gonna be seeing soon too. The township, I think I mentioned to everybody, I wasn't sure if everybody was at that meeting, but the township board has placed a gas station moratorium for any new applicants to come in. That was done in June or July, I believe, so it'll run out in December. So before December, you'll see some language on that, on what we want to, see how we want to approach gas stations coming in the future. So, just a heads up, we don't have anything really on it yet, but just want to give you a heads up of something to come.
Anybody have anything else?
Motion to adjourn at 7:43 PM.
Motion by Mr. Anderson, support by
Support.
Mr. Yancho. Quick on the trigger there. All those in favor, signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.